As a small business owner, have you ever felt overwhelmed by the pressure of choosing the right hire or leading a team? Or have you ever found yourself tolerating a bad hire because you fear trying and failing again as you repeat the hiring process? If so, you're not alone, and you are in the right place. Welcome to the Growing Your Team podcast. The Growing Your Team podcast teaches business owners like you to expand your unique business by teaching you to master the hiring and team management process. Hiring and managing a team does not have to be a challenge. You just have to learn to do it right. And the Growing Your Team podcast teaches you how to become a confident leader who hires right every single time. Now, let's jump into the show where each episode you will learn tips on how to identify what type of help you need on your team, how to source amazing candidates, how to conduct interviews that lead you to your ideal team member, how to onboard successfully, and how to lead every person in your business so you have a team of rock stars who you are happy to pay every single paycheck. So let's jump in and teach you how to hire like a pro. Hello, Jamie Van Kuyk here, and welcome back to the Growing Your Team podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about reviewing resumes. This is such an important step in the process, and one that I think people spend way too much time on. And that might sound a little kind of confusing. It's an important step, but yet people spend too much time. And what do I mean by this? It is an important step of the hiring process because reviewing a resume determines who gets an interview, and who gets an interview determines who gets the job. So we want to make sure that we're getting the right people into our interviews, because if we don't, we're not going to be able to hire the right person for our opening. So it's an important step because it really is that gatekeeper to finding your perfect fit for your position. But at the same time, we have to remember that we're not actually hiring based off a resume. We are just giving someone the opportunity for a conversation based on a resume. And what I find is that a lot of times people, when they're reviewing resumes, so not just small business owners, but anyone in any fields, when they review a resume, they try to determine too much from a piece of paper. They try to determine every qualification this candidate might have, exactly how they performed in their past positions, and more based on a few bullet points. A resume is never going to give you enough information to determine if someone is the perfect fit for your opening. We are not hiring based off resumes. We are giving conversations to people based off of resumes. So we don't want to be sitting there trying to read between the lines. We don't want to be dissecting every word to see what do they mean by this, or I'm assuming this. We want to make sure that we're looking for the right stuff to say, this person's a good fit for a conversation, where then I can determine what they meant by their experience and if their experience actually aligns with what I'm looking for. So if you find yourself reviewing resumes and you're spending a lot of time reviewing that resume, you're not doing it right. Depending on the role, depending on what we're looking for, sometimes you can make a decision in less than 30 seconds and have it be a good, thorough decision based on facts. For other positions, it might take you a little bit more time to find what you're looking for, but in any way, shape, or form, if you're spending more than 2 minutes per resume, either you're trying to find something that's not there, or you're trying to find a reason to qualify or disqualify this person because of things that don't really matter. So you're trying to do a little bit more digging, or you're trying to read between the lines and make up stories that don't necessarily exist for that candidate. We should be able to make a decision on all resumes in less than 2 minutes. And for most positions, it's going to take even less time than that. So if you're spending any more time than 2 minutes, which I still think is very, very long, you're not reviewing resumes properly. So how do we review a resume properly to determine if someone is a good fit for a conversation? So the first thing to remember is you're not going to see everything on a resume that is going to tell you if this candidate is right for your opening. Which means, yes, you are going to have conversations with people who are not a perfect fit. You won't know that they're not that perfect fit until that conversation. So it's going to have to happen. If we try to say, hey, I want to review all these resumes and bring it down to 1 or 2 people, most likely it's not going to happen unless you only got 4 resumes to review. So you are going to have to interview people that end up not being a good fit in that first round of interview. But the only way we know they're not a good fit is through an actual conversation when we determine, okay, well, they put this on their resume, what they really meant is X and we need Y. Or yes, they have experience in this area, but it's not exactly the experience that I'm looking for. So when we go and review our resumes, how I train my clients to review resumes is to look for 3 things. These are our 3 must-have items that we need to see on a resume to determine if someone is qualified for an interview. So what do these 3 things look like? Well, it's going to depend on the position you're hiring for. If you're hiring for an administrative assistant, those three things might look very different than if you're hiring for a director of marketing. But these are our 3 non-negotiables that we should definitely be able to see on a resume if someone is qualified. For example, if you're looking for a director of marketing, one of those 3 things probably has something to do with them being in certain type of marketing positions before. If someone has no marketing experience whatsoever, they're not a good fit for your director of marketing position, right? But then there's other positions out there where someone might not necessarily need to have done that particular role or been in that particular industry or in that particular division of a company before. We're looking for transferable skills. So maybe, for example, for your position, you're looking for things like, this person is going to work face-to-face with my clients. So customer service skills are number 1. They're a non-negotiable for this role. So has this person worked with clients and customers before? We might even get more specific there. Have they worked with clients in a repetitive fashion? So not like, for example, retail or restaurant work where, yes, they're working with clients, but it's kind of that one and done transaction. Yes, someone might come back, but each transaction is very individualized. So we might be looking for, did they own a client relationship? Did they have to maintain a client relationship or go back to the same clients repeatedly in order to continue doing their work? Some other things we might look for in transferable skills, and this is one thing I hear all the time from small business owners, is I need someone who's a self-leader. So what does being a self-leader look like on resumes? One of the ways we look for this on a resume is, did they do more than the bare minimum? So we might look for people who have volunteer positions listed on their resume. Or if they are young in their career, they're not just listed, okay, well, I went to college, I was involved in this or that. Things where it shows that they were doing more than the bare minimum to get through whatever it is that they're getting through. So we have our must-have criteria, and typically I say 3. Occasionally I've had a client where we extended it to 4, and occasionally I've had a client where it's only 2 because those 2 items are so important that they're the only things that are kind of those deal breakers. But our must-have criteria are the deal breakers. And one of the things I said that I will repeat is these are things that we can easily see on a resume. So sometimes I'll have a client that says, it is a deal breaker if they don't know XYZ software. Not everyone includes every type of software that they use on their resume. So this might not be something we can easily detect on a resume. So sometimes we're not able to have our hiring deal breakers as our resume review deal breakers. So then this brings in the other layer. We have our nice to have criteria. The nice to have criteria are those things where either there are negotiable items, so a candidate is better if they have this, but they don't need to have this, or our nice to have items could be, well, we'd really like them to have 2 of the 3, but if a candidate has our must have items and 2 of these 3 nice to have items, we'll give them a conversation. Or it could be items, like I said, like certain software that we might not be able to easily see on a resume. So we need to have a conversation or have a follow-up question before that interview. So they send in their resume, we follow up with a question to clarify stuff before the interview to see if they have these things or have the skill or have this background. So this is our nice to have criteria. The beauty of nice to have criteria is, let's say we went through our must have criteria and we create a list of 20 resumes that all have our must have criteria. And we're sitting there saying, okay, 20 resumes. If I schedule 30-minute interviews with each one of those, that is still 10 hours of my time that I have to block off on my calendar for interviews. I don't have 10 hours to give, right? Because most of the time when we're hiring, if you're doing the hiring yourself and you're doing those first round interviews yourself, you a lot of times don't have those hours, because if you had those hours, you probably wouldn't be hiring in the first place. You have enough hours in your business. You have enough availability in your business for those hours. So you might be saying, I don't have 10 hours to interview 20 candidates. What do I do? How do I start with the best of the best and then keep the other ones as backups? So this is also where we can pull in our nice to have criteria. So if we have 20 candidates that all have our must have criteria, we can use our nice to have criteria to rank them. So instead of feeling like we have to interview all 20, we can rank them because we say, okay, these 5 candidates have all our must have criteria and all our nice to have criteria. So we're going to start with those 5 first. These next 5 candidates have 2 out of our 3 nice to have criteria. So we're going to interview those ones second. That's going to be our second batch. And then these other ones only have 1 of our nice to have criteria. So we're going to save that last batch of 10 candidates for the third group that we'll bring in for interviews if we need to go deeper. So that nice to have criteria sometimes helps separate the pack. So that way you can more specifically target who would be a better fit for your opening based on the information you see on a resume. Okay, so that is how we go about and review resumes. Once again, we don't read between the lines. So when we create our must-have criteria and our nice-to-have criteria for a resume, we want to be specific. We want to know what to look for that. We don't want to get into this thing of, ooh, what do they mean by that? Maybe they mean this, or how do I identify that? These things should be easily identifiable on a resume, which means, and I'll repeat this because this is important, some deal breakers on whether someone is qualified for a job are not must-have criteria for reviewing a resume because they're things that are hard to detect on a resume. So sometimes we need to save those things for an interview. With this process, it should become clear on who to interview. You should have your clear yeses, your clear nos, and possibly some people in the maybe category. So for example, sometimes we put people in the maybe category because they don't have all 3 of our must-have criteria, but they're really, really strong in 2 out of the 3. They have lots of experience that aligns with it. And we kind of save them in our back pocket in case we need to go deeper into our candidate pool. Or maybe they're the ones where we're like, I don't know. They seem to have everything, but do they really have everything? Or am I just thinking they have everything and we want to get another person to review it for us? And that's okay. it's okay to say, am I reading this correctly? What does someone else think? If someone else was reading this and I say, this is the criteria that is needed for an interview, would they say the same thing that I said? And then we know if we're using our biases to either tell us to interview someone or not to interview someone, or if this person should really get an interview. And let me give you a client example of why this is super important. So I was working with a client years ago, and we were at this stage of the process. She had reviewed the resumes that it came in, and then she was using our time together to confirm. So this was a consulting client, so she was doing the recruiting herself. I was there to guide her through the process. I reviewed the resumes. Okay, yep, everything looks aligned, and came to one, and I reviewed it. And I asked her the question, hey, so why do you want to give this person an interview? And she kind of looked things over, and she really couldn't think of anything. So I was like, okay, well, let me ask a more specific question. We have our must-have criteria that someone needs to have to get an interview. So what from that list does this candidate have on their resume? And she looked it over and she said, I don't know. I'm not seeing any of it. I was like, okay. So now that we took that away, that we're not seeing that must-have criteria, why do you think you put this person into the yes category? She looked back through the resume and she finally said, because the resume's pretty. And I'll share this example a lot of times when I speak and a lot of people laugh, which is fine. But this happens more often than we care to admit. We hear that and we think to ourselves, wow, that is so silly. I would never do that. But it happens all the time when we let opinions over facts dictate what happens in the hiring process. And maybe for some positions, like if it's a real design heavy position, a pretty well-designed resume is something that matters. I would say put it in the nice to have versus the must have, but some people might disagree with me on that. But that can't be the only reason we bring someone in for an interview. Someone going to our alma mater should not be the only reason we bring someone in for an interview. We should be spending our precious time on the people whose resumes show that they are a potential good fit for our position. So follow these tips, and I guarantee you it'll be easy to identify who should get an interview. And then we're not relying on opinion. We're not relying on biases to make those decisions. We're relying on facts. We're really looking critically at what someone has to offer and making good decisions. Because once again, a resume is a gatekeeper for an interview. And we can't hire the right person if that right person never gets an interview. So make sure that you are bringing the right people in by effectively reviewing resumes. And that wraps up this episode of the Growing Your Team podcast. But before we go, are you ready to gain the confidence to hire like a pro, but need to find a way to do so that fits your limited time and doesn't stretch your budget beyond its capacity? Let's face it, hiring has a lot of complexities. And if you don't know what you're doing at each step, you increase your chances of hiring the wrong person and then having to spend both time and money to rehire. So it's something that you want to do well the first time. But if you're like many small businesses that are hiring their very first contractors and employees, you most likely don't have thousands of dollars to spend on high-level hiring consultant services or full-service recruiting. But you still need help. You still need guidance. You still need the support to hire well. That is exactly what the Micro Hiring Consulting Program is for. This is a consulting program designed to support you through the process of hiring and onboarding contractors and part-time and full-time employees in a manner that fits your schedule and your budget. It's a month-to-month consulting program that gives you access to one-on-one calls, office hours, live training, and unlimited email support so you have expert eyes on every job post, interview question, onboarding plan, or anything that you create, so that way you know it will work for you and be successful in the process of finding your ideal candidate. To learn more about this consulting opportunity and how you can get hiring support that fits your time and your budget, head on over to growingyourteam.com/micro. Once again, go to growingyourteam.com/micro to learn more about this consulting program that's going to help guide you to successful hires every time.